I've got a real problem with procrastination. I bought this slab well over a year ago, and the place that I purchased this slab has since gone out of business. And this is all to make my wife an adjustable desk, and that's what I hope to finish up today. So you may have seen this slab before, as it's been sitting in my shop for a long time now. And this is an elm slab, and I just recently flattened it in a video where I featured the Speed Tool router sled. And that router sled did a great job of getting this slab to the point where we can actually think about making it into some furniture. Now my wife works from home, at least part of the time, which means a lot of hours spent sitting at her desk. So when she asked me to build her a desk, she wanted something that would give her the option to sit or stand. So being the husband that I am, I did what any other trophy husband would do. I used my clout on YouTube to see if I could get one of these desks for free. And surprisingly, Flexispot said yes. We'll not only give you a desk, but a chair to go with it. But hold up, before you click away, there's going to be a lot of woodworking in this video. We're going to install some bow ties on some cracks on this slab, as well as some C-channel, which I've never done before. And I'm guessing if this is like any other woodworking project, I'm going to run into a few pickles along the way. So I'm excited to see how I resolve these issues. So let's not waste any more time and get these boxes unwrapped so that I can get some dimensions for that slab. So this desk came in 2 boxes and everything was very nicely packaged. There was 1 box for the desktop as well as 1 box for the frame. And here's a look at all the pieces for the frame. As you can see, the frame is made out of metal and there's some electrical. Now one thing I was really pleased with is this thing's got instructions for dummies like me. Since I'm still learning to read, instructions with pictures are always a bonus. So I got right to it and started putting this thing together. Even the hardware for this assembly was clearly labeled and corresponded to each step. And while I was putting this thing together, I really came to appreciate how sturdy this thing is. Even though these legs are going to move up and down, there's no slop in them whatsoever. And once I got the basic frame put together, I decided to switch out the feet with the included rollers. With the basic frame assembled, I now want to do some measurements just to make sure that my slab will fit perfectly with this unit. Now of course I did do some research before I got this desk, as I already have my slab cut down to rough size. And luckily the specs on this desk are fairly accurate, as it comes in at right about 43 inches. And since it had been a while since I'd played with this slab, I just wanted to confirm it would fit. And since we're at just a little bit over 49 inches, this should be perfect. So next up, I placed the slab on the base just to see what it would look like. And as you can see here, there's plenty of overhang on either side. So now that I know the slab will fit reasonably on top of this base, I think I'm running into my first pickle. I really don't like this color. In fact, I wish it was black. Now one solution would be to paint that base black, but I already mentioned I'm a procrastinator and I don't want to send this project into next year. Now they did send this bamboo desktop, but it doesn't match any of the furniture that I've made already. And if we place the bamboo desk on top, you can see how much better it matches the frame of this desk. So I got to thinking, you know who else needs a desk? It's me. Right now I'm doing all my voiceovers in a closet. And my shop even has an office in the back that's frankly being used as a closet right now. So I decided to get another Flexispot desk, this time with the frame in black, and keep that white one for myself, in true trophy husband fashion. Now this isn't the exact same model as the white one, but it does have a very similar frame. Now let's put the slab on the black one and see if it looks any better. And I really dig the way this black one looks with the slab versus the white one, so I guess we're going to get a 2-for-1 build today. Now you may have noticed I've already hooked up some of the electronics on that black one, and we'll do the same thing to the white one when we get to that point. And here's a sneak peek of the versatility my wife will get with this desk, from its low point to its high point. Now I already mentioned that the dimensions on these two desks are virtually identical, but let's take a quick peek. With both desktops removed, you can see the basic structure of the frame is identical. The only difference between the black and the white one at this point is the electronics that are installed on the black one, even down to the mounting holes that are on the 2 extensions. Now that we have our frame figured out for now, let's get down to addressing the slab. One of the first issues you'll see are some of the cracks that are right along the edges. And these are on both sides, and some are more prominent than others. There's also some knot holes that we'll need to fill. And there's also some damage on one side that I'll need to address. And if we flip the slab over, you'll see the other side ain't perfect either. Mainly, you can see the continuation of those cracks on the other side, which are a little larger on this side, as well as some major knots. And finally, if we flip that slab over again, you'll see there needs to be some live edge cleanup. So let's get started cleaning up this slab so that we can get both desks built. So as I said earlier, I used a router sled to flatten this slab, but there's still some cleanup that needs to be made. So the first thing I'm going to do is to smooth this baby out with some 80 grit sandpaper. And I'm going to use the rotating feature on the Rotex just to make this a little quicker. So I'll mark this slab with my pencil and get to sanding. Now this is the first elm slab I've ever worked with, and I've already made a couple of pieces for this desk set out of this slab already, and if you're interested in seeing those videos, I'll leave links in the description below. And I'll have to tell you, after making those first two pieces, I absolutely love elm. It's kind of like the middleman between maple and walnut. It's got a beautiful, warm, brown finish that I haven't seen in any other wood. Once I have both of these faces sanded up, it's time to address some of these knots. And what I've typically used to fill these knots is some black CA glue. The black seems to go perfectly with any wood, whether you're using something like maple or walnut or any other species. It's also extremely quick. Instead of having to wait around for epoxy to cure, you can cure this almost immediately with some accelerator. And I think this is the perfect choice for this slab since all the knot holes are close to the surface. Now if these holes were any deeper, I would think about using epoxy, but many of these holes are as small as a pinprick. Now one little tip when applying CA glue is you always want to make sure that the glue is protruding above the surface of the wood. This will help you avoid having to do multiple applications. While that CA glue is drying, it's time to address that major scar on the side of the slab. Now this was kind of a real bummer for me as I wanted to keep a live edge on both sides of the slab. But this thing just couldn't be saved. So what I did is I traced the grain on the entire edge of the slab to exclude the scar. Then I grabbed my jigsaw and traced that line all the way down. And after making that cut, I now have a new walking stick. And once that live edge was removed, I actually didn't mind the look. And I think this is only attributable to really following that grain line. But since that jigsaw left a lot of marks, I'm just going to do a rough sanding at 80 grit. With one side done, it was time to take a look at the other. And I actually asked a lot of you guys on my community page on whether or not I should remove the second side. And the overwhelming response was to leave the live edge, and I'm so glad that I did. But it was still pretty rough, so I just gave it a light sanding. With that CA glue now having had plenty of time to fully cure, it was now time to clean that up. And as you can probably tell, I laid on this CA glue pretty thick. It's been my experience when you lay it on this thick, you really need to sand it down until you get to that knot, as you really shouldn't see clumps of black. Sometimes you have to sand this more than you think you should. With that CA glue now sanded down, it was time to hit my scrap pile to find a couple of pieces of wood for my bow ties. And I found some nice mahogany as well as a chunk of walnut. Now the mahogany was in great shape already and almost the perfect thickness, but I needed to resaw that walnut to get it to a more appropriate thickness. And once I resawed that walnut, I took both pieces over to the drum sander to get them to the exact same thickness. And just like that, I had my stock for my bow ties. So let's begin to stabilize our first crack. And to do this, I'm going to use one of my favorite tools that I don't use enough, the infamous Shaper Origin. So my first order of business is to lay out all my shaper tape. And since we're dealing with some intricate pieces here, I'm going to lay them out a little closer than I normally would, right at about 3 inches. After I have my tape laid down, I can scan my workspace, which will include that crack we're going to stabilize. With my workspace scanned, I can now place that bow tie exactly where I want it on that crack. Now when doing bow ties, the first thing that I like to do is to trace the outside of the bow tie. Once I've done that, you can see the results we get right on top of that crack. But I need to cut out the entire area inside of that outline. So to do this, I'll simply adjust the cut on the shaper to a pocket. And then I can hog out all that material on the inside. And I used a smaller bit for this process, so it took quite a bit of time. But once it was done, you just can't argue with those results. On the opposite side of the slab, I also had a smaller crack that was beginning to form. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a smaller bow tie here just to prevent further cracking. And I repeated the exact same process as I did for the other bow ties just on the other side. And once again, perfect results with that shaper. Now that we have the pockets for our bow ties routed out, it's now time to make the bow ties themselves. And I'm going to do these on the Shaper workstation. Now the nice thing about the workstation is you don't have to use any shaper tape. You simply take some double-sided tape and attach your workpiece to the cutting station and you're ready to go. Whenever I use the shaper, I like to use the auto function. And when using that function, you can really see how the router moves independently from the frame of the shaper. Now when cutting out my first two bow ties into this mahogany, the smaller bow tie moved on me, so I'm going to have to recut this one, but the larger one looks great. So I'll continue on and recut that smaller one as well as cut out one in walnut. And with all three done, it's time to get them in. So after removing that shaper tape, I'm just going to load up all these pockets with a ton of glue, making sure that I not only get the bottoms of these pockets but also the sides. And once everything's lathered up, I can put them into place and tap them down. And with the two larger ones in place, I can do the same thing with the smaller one. Now one thing that I like to do is to sand them down while that glue is still kind of wet. This allows any major gaps to be filled with sawdust. But inevitably, there's still going to be some gaps. So I'll just put some wood glue on top of those cracks and squeeze it down with my finger. Then I can sand it down again without using any dust collection. This will allow that wood glue to really take on that sawdust and fill up any visible cracks. And I'll repeat this process with that little guy on the other end. And here's a quick look at how seamlessly those bow ties come together after this process. With the bow ties complete, it's now time to address the sides. And here you can see I've got one smooth, square side that I cut previously with the track saw. But on the other side, it's still rough cut from the mill. Not only is it rough, but it's also crooked, as you can see from this shot here. So I'm just going to measure from that square side to find the shortest distance to that rough side. And that comes in to about 49.5 inches. So I'll take a couple measurements and mark it out on that rough side. After that, I can line up my track saw and get the rough side parallel to the finished side. Once that's done, both sides are cleaned up and look great. So now it's time to start thinking about how we're going to mount this slab. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to remove those brackets on the desk. So for this project, I actually purchased some C-channel, and the reason I purchased this C-channel was to protect the wood from wood movement. And if we look at the C-channel, you can see they have little pill-shaped holes that will allow the screws that are placed in the slab to move back and forth as the season changes. And after thinking about this for a while, I thought, why can't I modify the brackets that came with the desk so that they have pill-shaped holes as well? And after a little bit of testing, that's exactly what I did to one of the brackets. As you can see, I've modified two of the holes so that we can account for wood movement. Not only is this going to save a little bit of time, but it's also going to save a little bit of money. And I can use this C-channel for another project. So let's modify this other bracket and continue on with the build. So I was actually looking forward to using C-channel on this project, but I just can't justify using it. All I needed to do was to drill a secondary hole on each side of the bracket. Then I just took a rotary tool to cut out the waste in the middle. And this went surprisingly well. I will have to say I slipped a couple of times and scratched up that paint, but it just won't be seen. And after this modification was made, you can see how easily that screw can move back and forth. With those modifications made, I can reinstall those brackets on either side. And I'll just place that slab on top just to see how it looks. With that slab in place, I can now position it so that it's directly on the center of that frame. So I'll just take my double square and make sure that we have equal overhang on either side. Once that's done, I'll simply mark out where I made those pill holes on the bottom of the slab. With all of those markings made, I can now take the slab off the frame and take it back to my workstation. With the slab upside down, you can see all of those markings very clearly. And it's right where I made these markings that I want to install some threaded inserts. So I picked up this nice set of multiple size threaded inserts on Amazon, and I'll leave a link in the description below for this set in case you're interested. And when I install these, I'm taking my awl and marking out the approximate center of that pill shape. By installing these inserts there, this will allow the wood to move in either direction. The nice thing about this set, other than the fact that it comes with multiple sizes, is it also comes with a drill bit as well as an Allen key. With those wood inserts installed, it's now time to regroup and get back to my desk. And the next thing that I want to do is to install the desktop as well as the electrical. So initially, installing this electrical looked a little daunting, but I tell you what, the instructions couldn't be more clear. Not only that, but this desktop was pre-drilled at all the appropriate spots. It was just a matter of positioning everything and sinking a couple of screws. Even the control panel on front had two options for placement. You could place it on the right hand side of the desk or the left hand side. And all the cords were truly plug and play. With a detailed schematic on the instructions, it was just a matter of clicking them into place. Now after installing all of these cords, you may be wondering about cord management. Well, that truly is not a problem with this desk, as there's multiple cord management accessories that are included with this desk. Just watch as I clean up all these cords and hide them out of sight. With all the electrical installed, it's now time to plug this bad boy in and test it out. And here you can see there's 7 buttons to this control panel. 4 memory positioning buttons that include a stand and sit button, an up and down button, as well as a memory store button. And after having everything installed, you can see how smoothly it transitions from one position to another. And the more I play with this thing, I could not only see it being used as a desk, but also a workspace in a shop. In order to complete this setup, I also needed to throw together that chair. And once again, the instructions were extremely easy to follow, and it only took me a few moments to set this up. Even all the tools for this assembly were included with the chair, and I'm pretty sure I could get used to this setup. The chair not only has a full 360 degrees of rotation, but also has many adjustable features, like the armrest, chair positioning, height, and much more. And even the headrest is extremely comfortable with its mesh back. Well, that's enough about my new desk and chair. Now let's get back to my wife's desk. And there's not a whole lot left to do here. The first thing that I want to do is to sand it down, and then we can put some finish on it and attach it to that frame. So I'll first mark up my slab with my pencil and then start the sanding process. And for this, I went from 80 to 120 to 180. I even broke out my new block plane, which I featured a couple of weeks ago. And I still haven't sharpened this thing. This is still the factory edge. And not only did I clean up the top and the bottom, but I also sanded the sides as well. I also broke down the corners, the sides, and the edges with both the block plane and the sander. Once I sanded down to 180, I did do a water pop at the very end. I just wanted to make sure I got all those fibers nice and smooth before the final finishing. And after doing the final water pop and letting it dry, it went from silky smooth to quite rough again. So I did one final sanding at 180 just to finish it off. So with everything now sanded, I'm now going to apply finish to the bottom of the desk. Once I've applied finish to the bottom of the desk, we can then install it onto the frame. Now for this desk, I'm going to use some Rubio Monocoat Pure. So after just a little bit of mixing and incorporating the hardener, I was ready for finishing. And here you can really see that beautiful warm color of that elm come out. And not only did this elm have a beautiful color, but there was also quite a bit of figure in this wood. And I applied this Rubio Monocoat first with a squeegee, and then I worked it in with a white Scotch-Brite pad. After that, I wiped off any excess with a clean rag. Once that bottom was finished, it was now time to place it back on top of that frame. And it's already starting to look good, but just wait till we get that finish on the top. Now to attach this top, I picked up this 1/4-inch hardware at Home Depot, and I simply screwed in 4 screws into those inserts that we installed earlier. And with those screws installed, this tabletop became rock solid. With the desktop now installed, we could apply finish to the very top. And here we'll get our first look at how beautiful those bow ties are. I couldn't be more pleased with the choice of walnut and mahogany. I think they complement the elm extremely well. Not to mention, I also use these same 2 species on the monitor stand as well as the side table for this desk. After all that finish was applied, I could then add the control panel to this desk. And this just goes in with a couple of screws on the bottom. I'm not a light guy. I weigh over 200 pounds. And although I'm getting a little bit thinner, I think both of these desks have the power to stand the test of time. And I'm super excited to finally have my own desk. In fact, I may use this as a workshop table. But more importantly, I couldn't be more pleased with the results on my wife's desk. Just take a look at how beautiful that wood looks. And the flaws in the wood has become a highlight with those bow ties. Not only do they look amazing, but they're going to hold this desk together for years to come. All the knot holes, cracks, and imperfections really make this a unique piece. And I'm also really glad I chose to keep that live edge on the front side. And I really like the combination of the high-tech and rustic feel of this desk. Well, thanks so much for joining me today on this double desk build. I really appreciate it, and if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment. It really does help out this small woodworking channel. Also, make sure you check out my website, www.flynndoggwoodwork.com. Until next time, take care as always.